What's up, everyone? This is part 15 of clearbnb, where we're rebuilding a vacation rental marketplace with Rails. In this episode, we're going to talk about expiring those checkout sessions so that if someone tries to go pay after they're reserving and they don't actually end up paying, that we don't keep the calendar blocked. So let's jump in. All right, so from a listing view, we can click on reserve, and then we can pick some dates that we want to potentially reserve. So we could say we want to book from 3/10 to 3/11, and we can click on reserve. But it says, sorry, this date is already booked for this range. So let's make it a little bit easier. And when we're on this view, let's render out all of the existing bookings for this listing. So we're going to go to the reservation new form, and right above here, we'll just make a UL. And this UL is going to go over a list of calendar events. And for each calendar event, we want to print out just like the status of the calendar event, and then maybe the status of the related, reservation too, if there is a reservation. So we'll say the start date, the end date, the calendar event status, and then if there is a reservation, so we're going to say .try reservation .try status. So not all calendar events have reservations related to them. So it's possible that we have some that are just blocked on the calendar. Okay, so we're saying no method each for nil class. That's because calendar events doesn't actually exist yet in this controller action. So we're going to go to the reservations controller and look at the new action. And down here we want to say at calendar events is at listing.calendar events. Does the listing actually have calendar events? So the calendar event belongs to a listing. So there is a listing ID in the calendar event database table. And so we should be able to say has many calendar events here. And then we can refresh this page. All right, cool. So now we see that there are several calendar events. And they're reserved. We've got like some that are booked. I'm actually just going to go in the database here and delete all the reservations and related calendar events. Reservation.destroy all and calendar event.destroy all, just so that we're starting fresh. Okay, so if we go from the 10th to the 11th and click on reserve, we're redirected to checkout. We can go through the whole process. So let's create a new reservation. Here, we'll click book. This should be good. And okay, we've got a booking from 3/10 to 3/11. Now if we go back to our listing here, when we go to reserve, we should now see this from 3/10 to 3/11. It is reserved and the reservation is booked. So now if we tried to book from maybe like from the 12th to the 13th, let's start the process. So we've started checking out here, but let's say that if we wanted to like go back and we didn't actually like finish the checkout process, right? Now we have a calendar event that says reserved, but the actual underlying reservation is pending. So like the person never actually finished paying, the guest never ended up paying. But right now we can't actually like go and book, like another guest could not come in here and book from the 12th to the 13th. So if we tried to book that, now it says undefined method each for nil class because we have an error in our controller. Reservations controller. So down here we also need calendar events in the case that we fail. All right. Start date is already booked for this range. So we're not able to book it even though the reservation is just in this pending state. I think that might be fine. I don't know, like maybe we should let, if the guest is the same user and there's a pending reservation, we should let them book over the top of it or something. I don't know. But I wanted to show another feature, which is a feature of checkout where you can expire a checkout session. So when we're creating the checkout session and redirecting to that checkout page or the payment page, we can set this expires at API parameter, and we can pass in a Unix timestamp for when we want this session to expire. So in the book listing like object that we created before, we can say expires at time.now, or like I think we can do like one.hour.from now plus, or like .2i. That should work to expire the checkout session in 1 hour. And what happens is after you expire the checkout session, there is a webhook event that will fire. And we don't have that here, but the checkout.session.expired event will fire. So we can take a look at the list of webhook event types here. And inside of checkout session, there's this one, checkout.session.expired. That will fire when a checkout session expires, whether it's naturally because we're hitting the expiration time, or because we've explicitly expired the session. So we can either like manually say, hey, this session that this person was going through, they bailed out of it and we want to expire the session so that someone else can get access to those dates. Or we can just set a time window that's the minimum is 1 hour, which is a little bit tricky because we have to wait at least an hour before expiring the session. But for now, this will at least give us something that will fire in 1 hour. We can go back and do some cleanup and such later, but for now, let's call that good. And then go into our webhook handler. So in our webhooks controller, we're calling this event job.perform later. So this is going to be in the event job, where if the source is Stripe, then we attempt to handle the Stripe event. So we come down into here, and we can add a new when block for the checkout.session.expired event. Now, when the checkout session expires, we want to grab the related reservation. And what I think, I guess we want to do the same sort of error handling. And then the status we want to update to is now going to be expired. So we might need to add that as another type over here on the reservation. So yeah, we're going to add a new status here of expired, and that'll be 4. Okay, so we have, so if the checkout session expires, we're going to look up the reservation, we're going to mark it as expired so that we can free up the dates, right? So what we need to do now is, in order to get this test working, we want to go into here, and we want to restart our job handler, and we want to restart Rails. Okay. So when, all right, so let's go through the process of checking out one more time. So we're going to say, we're going to book on the 14th to the 16th, and we'll say reserve. That creates a checkout session. Now this checkout session, I can see the ID in the URL. Again, that's also going to be stored on the reservation object. But I'm just going to grab it from the URL here and go into the terminal, and I'm going to say Stripe checkout sessions expire, and I think this should expire the checkout session. Okay, cool. That marks the status as expired, and we should have received a webhook notification to our webhooks controller, event 177, and yeah, checkout session expired is the event type. Cool. So that should have marked our reservation as expired. So if we look back at the the list of bookings now the status of that reservation is expired. So what we want to be able to do is now be able to book as another guest or as the same guest or whatever these dates from the 14th to the 16th. But if we try to reserve that now, it says this start date is already booked for this range, or like this date is already booked, right? So this is where it's going to get a little bit fancy on the inside of our validation logic for the calendar event. So that's kind of like how you handle expiration. We can probably go back and improve that a bit just to make it so that like as you're like if you cancel out by going to the return URL, maybe we just like immediately expire that. Yeah, I think that's what we want to do too, but whatever. We'll use the event type, and then also what what we need to do here is that in order for us to be able to book those expired, or the times where the reservation was expired or canceled, in fact, like in our existing system, you're unable to book where there's a canceled reservation. Like we don't have the concept of being able to book over that. We just have, we're validating the start and end date, and if they overlap, then you're not able to book for that listing. So what we need to do is add in some more logic into this validation that says only require that the start and end date don't overlap in the scope of the listing if the status is blocked because it was manually blocked, or if the status of the reservation is in the state of canceled or expired or one of the others. So if it's pending or if it's booked, we want to block that. Otherwise, we want to not support it. And so again, we're using this like validates overlap. We're using this validates overlap Ruby gem, which was, it's super handy. And it has this query options parameter that we can use. So query options. And this is going to allow us to say we want to joins. We want to add like a joins thing because we want to join it to reservations. And then we want to have a where clause that will be kind of specific. So let's see, our joins is going to be like left outer joins reservations as r, or r on r dot ID is equal to calendar events.reservation ID. And then if r.status is in 0 or 1, this is where it gets a little gnarly when we're using these. There's probably ways to do this with AREL or something fancy, but because we're using this validates overlaps thing, I just wanted to like write the query manually. So, or the status is, so calendar events.status is equal to blocked. So if the calendar event status is blocked, or if the reservation, or if the related reservations status is one of pending or booked, then we want to disallow folks booking over this. So let's see if we can get that working now. So we'll refresh, go back over here. Okay, so then if we try to book this, joins. This always confused me. Joins, like the active record method or whatever is joins, but the SQL query thing is join. I'm using left outer join. I'm pretty sure I need to do an outer join because reservations is not strictly required for calendar events. So that's why I'm doing left outer, is that like, I want all the calendar events, and then if there's a related reservation, I want that too, but I don't want to make that a hard requirement. Let's see if we return, blah, blah, blah. I spelled events wrong somewhere. And boom. Okay, so we were able to book over those dates. Okay, so let's see. So if we try to reserve over a booked date, so 310 to 311, 310 to 311, this should fail. Good, start date already taken. And then if we try to book over 314 to 316, it should not let us because there's a pending one. 314 to 316, that failed. Good, good, good. And then we should be able to, let's make a new event that is, I don't know, in the future here, the 28th to the 31st, reserve. And then let's expire this one. Again, using the Stripe CLI, just passing in that ID, we end up with an expired booking. We should have gotten like webhook events and such. And now if we come back over here, refresh the page, and then click reserve. Now we see this expired one. So now we should be able to book on 28 to 31, 28 to 31, click reserve. And that works. Cool. Also, let's talk about, like, if I take this checkout session ID here, and let's say the user's like still in the checkout flow and they just like left their page up for, an hour or a day or whatever. And at some point their session was expired, but then they try to like continue booking and they're like, okay, finally I'm ready to book. Our family is all, we figured out where everyone is going to stay. You click book then you see this expired link thing. So you're not able to actually like pay for it. So that is the goal. That's what you want, is to have that expired session, prevent them from booking. The whole goal here is to avoid double bookings. So if we go back to our book listing thing here, we have this success URL, which goes to the reservation URL, and we have this cancel URL, which right now is coming back to this cancel listing, or to the listing URL for the listing. This is if they push, like if they click on this back button. This back button, you'll notice that even if you look down in the bottom right there, it says localhost 3000 listings 1, right? So that's going to bring them back to the listing URL for this specific listing. But one thing that we could do to improve this is have a cancel URL for the reservation. So what I think we want to do is say like cancel reservation URL that will take in the reservation, and we'll go to our routes and add this reservations. Oh, we already have a cancel one. Actually, let's do, oh gosh. Yeah, we don't want to, okay. So, well, maybe let's call it expire. Yeah, because we want it to expire. So we'll make this a get request to expire, and we're going to call expire. So then we'll go to the reservations controller, and we'll make a new method here, expire, Stripe checkout session.expire. And we want to pass in params ID of the session, and then we want to redirect to the listings path. Sure, we'll just pipe them back over to the listings path. So what's going to happen is if someone clicks that back button, they're going to come back this direction. But in the book listing, yeah, so when they come back, we also want this to include this like checkout session ID parameter. That's going to be like the session ID. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so if we click on reserve, we're going to reserve some dates in April now. So maybe the 1st to the 3rd. Click on reserve. All right, now when we hover over this, if you look down in the query string, we have expire, but we don't have the query string param. This needs to be like a question mark situation. So we'll go back. There is no back because we missed the like slash here, or the question mark. So that should expire just like this, and then we end up with, okay, so Cabin in the Woods, reserve. We'll pick another date here in April. We'll say the 10th to the 12th. Click on reserve. That creates a new checkout session, redirects, and now we have a query string parameter that has the session ID. So this reservation 44, right? If we look at reservation.find 44, this is it. Right now it's in the pending state, okay? And what's going to happen is when we click on the back button, that will bring us to the reservations controller, and that's going to make a get request to this expire action. This expire action is going to fire an API call to Stripe to expire that session. So because we click this back button, it's going to expire the session and say like, okay, those dates are freed up again. So we click on that button, we expired the session, and now if we go back in here, we should see that those dates that we just tried to book are now expired. So if someone else wants to book, they can do so immediately. So we can now try to book 410 to 412, and we don't actually have to go back through and do anything fancy, because we have the API call going, and then we're listening to the webhook that's coming in for expiration, and all of that is just being handled gracefully. So now if we try to go through this again, what do we get? So those dates again were from, the 10th, right, from the 10th to the 12th. So here's the booked reservation. We go back to Cabin in the Woods. We try to reserve. Now that it's booked, we won't be able to go over the top of this and book again by going to, April 10th through the 12th and trying to reserve that again. Sorry, that date is already taken. So that was the goal. We wanted to like expire things so we didn't end up with double bookings. If you enjoyed this episode, or if you're enjoying the series, I would really appreciate a subscribe, maybe a thumbs up, and otherwise we'll see you in the next one.